One of my fondest childhood memories that I remember to this day is from when I was 12 years old. So every year, my middle school would take the grade 7 class on a 3-day field trip to Quebec City, which is 9 hours away from Toronto. So when I was in grade 7, we went on that trip, and for a lot of us, it was the first time being out of town without our parents. And we got to stay in a hotel with our friends. We got to pick our roommates, and it was, oh my God, it was so much fun. So I was rooming with 3 other girls, and one of them was my best friend at the time. And one night, we decided to do makeovers. And my best friend did my makeup. She applied blush and eyeliner and eyeshadow and mascara. And that was the first time I had ever had any makeup applied to my face. So I had no idea what to expect. So I just sat in the chair and waited for her to do her thing. And when she was done, she's like, go take a look. I look in the mirror and I look like Ronald McDonald. But it was so much fun. Like, I remember that so fondly. And I didn't know it then. It really hit me when I started writing this episode. But what we were doing in that room was one of the oldest forms of female power, and one that patriarchy has been trying to kill for centuries. Hold up, DJ, hold up. Because we're getting a little nostalgic here, let's play my old theme song. Yeah. All right, pop quiz. What did that story, this podcast, and the Me Too movement all have in common? They were all forms of gossip. Yeah, maybe you're like, what? But that's what happens when women get together, share information, share lived experiences, increase collective knowledge, question illegitimate authority, and expose literal atrocities. And when women's talk and information sharing gets demonized, history has shown us that it ends up in femicides, witch burnings, torture, as I'm going to discuss in this episode, public humiliation, which I'm also going to discuss, social isolation, depression, gaslighting. Shall I go on? No, because we understand that beneath every forbidden or demonized practice for women lies the thing that they fear the most, which is our power. There's a Chinese proverb that says, the tongue is the sword of a woman, and she never lets it go rusty. Okay, but that was only slightly misogynistic. Let's see if there's any other ones. There's an old folk saying in North Africa and the Middle East that says, if you tell a woman, you tell a village. Okay, not that bad. Okay, let's take a look at this Japanese proverb. Where there are women and geese, there is noise. All right, there we go. And let's see what should we close off with? Oh, okay. There's a Spanish saying, mujer chismosa, casa ruinosa. A gossiping woman, a ruined house. And okay, you know what? Those weren't that bad. They were probably just made by some guy who got mad that he had a small dick and his girlfriend went and told her other friends about it. But there's actually a modern proverb that I found that is way worse. It goes something like this. I'd rather have witches around than annoying brain-dead parasites that are feminists of today. They burned the wrong ones. That proverb was actually a hate comment on one of my videos. So this is what happens when women use their voice, get together, and critically discuss things. Not only is it labeled as gossip, but it invokes these really weird and twisted desires that a lot of people and a lot of men seem to have, that points to the fact that they kind of want to kill us. And what all of these fuck-ass proverbs have in common, they show that patriarchy doesn't just hate gossip, it hates women bonding and sharing information. And gossip was just the excuse. It was like the scapegoat. Super quick, in case you don't know who I am, how dare you? My name is Nikki. I am your host and the baddest bitch in the building. Not to be confused with you, who is also the baddest bitch in the building. I have a bachelor's in public policy with high distinction. Put some respect on my motherfucking name. Oh, sorry. Excuse me? I'm sorry. I'm really such a lady. And a master's in political science with a focus on political theory. So, y'all, when I read Machiavelli, when I read The Prince on this podcast, it's because I literally studied it. And before starting this podcast in my previous life, I used to work as a management consultant. And I advised some of the bigwigs in Canadian corporations, let me tell you. And it was really working with those executives, working with the CEOs, the C-suite, sitting in boardrooms with these people and talking with them and observing them, that I really learned that power is not given. It is never, ever given. It is either taken or it's created. And this podcast is all about how we can take that power that was robbed from us. And it's December now, at least if you're listening to this at the time when it's dropping. It is December, and I want to thank all of you who've posted your Spotify Wrapped, who've tagged me in them, or who've sent them to me privately and told me that I'm your top podcast, or I'm your top 5 podcast, or I'm the only podcast you listen to, or any form of support. I really, really, really appreciate it. The Baddest Bitch in the Building was one of the fastest growing podcasts on Spotify in 2025. Isn't that crazy? And it was one of the most shared podcasts too. And that's all you. That's all you baddies. That's your work. That's you sharing this podcast with your friends, your sisters, your daughters, your moms. This wouldn't have been possible without you. And you ladies are the original listeners. You are literally the OGs. The OBs, the original baddies. Honestly, a year ago, I was working my corporate job and writing my episodes on the subway when I was commuting to and from work. I was editing things in the evenings, and I was posting my episodes sporadically on Wednesday evenings because that was the only day of the week where I didn't have to go to the gym or piano class. And so my Wednesday drops are a legacy of that. Fast forwarding now, I published my first book. I have this community of all you amazing, pretty, smart ladies. And I'm gonna ugly cry, but thank you all so much. I really, really, really appreciate it. Like every time I get a message from you or a comment or anything where you're sharing how this podcast has been part of your healing process or part of you, whatever part of your life that this helped you with, that means more to me than you can ever imagine. And I have no words. So thank you all. Thank you all so much. I'm gonna cry, so I'm just gonna shut up now. And since I mentioned my book, that's all it takes for me to start talking about my book. But if you haven't gotten a copy already, it is on my first 20 girly laws of power. I have completely updated a lot of them. I've improved the examples, the contents, the structure, and the book is literally 20 different ways that you can hack the patriarchy by finding its loopholes, finding its blind spots, dismantling internalized patriarchy that's in your head, and succeeding in your work life, in your relationships, in your friendships, and just in life in general. So there's something in there for everyone. If you're in a male-dominated workplace, if you're in a toxic workplace, if you're in a relationship where you feel depleted, feel like you want to shift the power dynamics or just get out of it altogether, in any relationship or any dynamic where you feel like you deserve more and you should be navigating it better, this book is for you. And to sweeten the deal, anyone who leaves a review on Amazon will get a free month of Patreon on me. So you know where to find me. Just DM me, email me, call me, beat me if you want to reach me, whatever works for you. So let's talk about gossip. Not to be confused with the thing that they accuse us of, the toxic, backstabbing gossip, but the thing they stole from us. And let me explain exactly what I mean. Gossip started as a positive social phenomenon. It didn't always have this bad rap that we think about today. And to really understand where gossip came from, we need to rewind to the Middle Ages. DJ, Cue up the historical music. There we go. Greetings and salutations. Okay, no, we're not going to do that. So the word gossip comes from the word God and sib. God, we know the meaning of that, the guy who gave birth to all of us, and sib, which meant relative. So the word godsib meant godparent or a close trusted friend. It didn't have any negative connotation, and it literally meant the girlies. Because mainly in England in the 14th and 15th centuries, women would give birth in the presence of other women. So it wouldn't just be the midwife who would attend to the birth, it would be her close friends and the girly pops. And these ladies were known as a woman's gossip. So from here on out, when I refer to the word gossip, I'm literally talking about the female bonding through information sharing and through close relationships with other women. I'm talking about the historical meaning of gossip, not to be confused with the butt crack, the new butt crack meaning of gossip. Be aware of that. When I say gossip, I'm not talking about girls getting together and saying, oh, her mom's a hoe, her dad's a hoe. Just to be clear. So in the Middle Ages, gossip was a collective knowledge network. Okay, it was information that women would share on survival, on labor and childbirth, on their bodies, on men, on community dynamics. It was a network that was essential for women's autonomy. Because think about it, if you lived in some English village in, let's say, 1457, there was no way of getting information about anything without leaving your house and talking to other people. And we take that for granted because right now, any information that we want is at our fingertips, and we're given more information than we could ever want or ask for anyways. And if you want to be nosy, you can do it from the comfort of your own home. You just go creep someone's Instagram. But for Gwendolyn in 1457, that was not possible. So women relied on other women to get the information that they needed for literally their survival and also for their social bonding. And in many parts of Europe during the Middle Ages, women had social power and they had tight-knit networks composed of other women. They didn't rely on men for survival, and they were pretty self-sufficient because they had communities of women by women. And that self-sufficiency part was huge. And you'll see exactly why in a moment when I discuss, frankly, I'm going to discuss some history that's going to piss you off. But before we get to that, I want to read something really interesting from an academic article about the evolutionary role of gossip. Here goes. 407 years ago. You know I have to say nonsense. Okay, here's the actual quote. For monkeys and apes, predators are the single most important factor influencing group size. As a species, ecological habits My cat just meowed. As a species, ecological habits expose it to increased risk of attack by predators, so its group size must be proportionately larger to protect its members. Now, even though this is about monkeys and apes and the predators that they face, we can say the exact same thing about women and the predators that we face. Gossiping and being part of a social network of other women significantly protected women from their main predators, which unfortunately were men. And I mean, I don't necessarily have to use the past tense here because this is still the case, but let's talk about these predators. Let's talk about how gossip went from being something positive and empowering to something demonized and eventually used as an excuse to kill and torture women. There are 3 different forces that we can attribute to the way gossip became demonized. The first one is the church. As I discussed in my previous episode on how religions groom girls to never realize that woman is God, religion is parasitic of morality. It codified its own form of morality, its own made up form of morality, and it conditions women to feel guilt if they don't follow it. So, around the 16th century is when the church started urging women to make their home and their husband the center of their life. And it highly discouraged women from visiting their friends and even their family after marriage. And through literature and music and theater, especially biblical plays, which were actually quite popular in England in the Middle Ages, gossip started to be depicted as something malicious. And these plays would show how women preferred their friends to their husbands, honestly valid. And a lot of the time it used satire, obviously at women's expense. For example, one play depicted Noah's Ark, and it showed Noah urging people to get on the boat. And then there was a woman sitting in a tavern with her girly pops, refusing to join her husband unless she could bring her gossips with her. And that scene ends in the wife beating the husband, which is honestly so iconic. It kind of reminds me of those TikToks of women at their wedding being like, oh, me sitting with my husband while I watch my friends at their table laughing without me. And every time I saw one of those TikToks, I sent it to my friends who were getting married. And then I remember at my friend's wedding a couple months ago, she literally came to our table and was like, I want to join you. I'm like, babe, you chose. I mean, you chose to get married. So, anyway, going back to these plays before I glitch. Like I said, these were biblical plays, and they were actually produced and financed by guilds, which are like an early form of labor unions. Think of them like that. They were organized groups of laborers that would control working conditions and wages. Like you would have the Bakers Guild or the Goldsmiths Guild, for example. And these guilds would produce and finance these plays. For example, the Carpenters Guild probably built the stage. And the reason they involved themselves in these productions was to increase their social standing among the lower class. Remember, everything goes back to flexing on people. And you might be wondering, why am I mentioning these guilds? You're going to understand why when I talk about the next force after the church that was really had to spoon up their ass about women gossiping. So what these plays and the literature and the music and these forms of art, art is a strong word, in the same way that we would call Sexy Red or Tekashi 69's music art, but these art forms were ways of showing how female friendships were in opposition to marriage. It was very much an either or. You can either be a good wife and a subservient wife, or you can be this weirdo who goes to the tavern and talks to her girlfriends all day. And they depicted women who have strong friendships and social bonds with other women as malicious, aggressive, selfish, hedonistic, domineering, because they'd be beating their husbands as they should, secretive, and it was very much this, again, this either or, because patriarchy operates in dichotomies. Remember, if you read my book, you see that at the beginning of each hack, I have a false dichotomy that we have to unlearn, because we're taught that you can either be this or that. You can either be pretty or you can be smart. You can either be humble or you can be a narcissist. There's no middle ground. There's always a bad option and a good option. And the good option is usually the one that keeps us non-threatening. So you can either be this domineering, aggressive wife, or you can be a subservient wife, a good wife. But really think about it. If somebody were to present to you two choices, hey, either be this aggressive woman who beats her husband or be this subservient woman who obeys her husband, which one would you choose? Obviously the one who beats her husband, let's be real now. But no, in all seriousness, these butt crack dichotomies are rooted in zero-sum thinking. Zero-sum thinking is this mindset that by you winning, someone else has to lose. There's a finite amount of things, and if you get something, it's because you've taken it away from somebody else. Or if somebody else gets something, it's because they took it away from you. And this is in exact opposition with the way that the world operates. Because the universe that we exist in could not even exist if it wasn't based on abundance. But I talk about this a lot, so I'm not going to repeat it here. The main takeaway, though, is that the church really pushed for women who had female friendships and who had their gossips to be depicted as these actual monsters. So that was the first force. The second force is the economic force. So remember when I was talking about the guilds? These guilds were actively trying to push women out. Because remember, women were pretty autonomous and self sufficient at the time. And obviously, this is in the Middle Ages before the cancer of capitalism really started to take off. We see early forms of capitalism, but this is when people had a craft rather than a career. And so when you were part of the Bakers Guild, you woke up in your home and went downstairs to the bakery that you operated, and that's how you'd make your living. And these guilds were actively pushing women out, especially with the rise of early capitalism that was happening at the time. So these guilds combined forces with the church and helped produce these plays, these biblical plays, to depict women as these crazy, malicious gossips to push forward that propaganda. Because institutions like capitalism and patriarchy need isolated and obedient women. But remember that capitalism, patriarchy, these are not the natural order of things. Because if an institution needs violence, propaganda, and brainwashing to institutionalize itself, then that was not the natural order to begin with, because you're forcing something to stay in place. You're forcing something to happen and threatening people if they don't uphold it. So it's not the natural order, despite what Chad and Brad want to think. So that was the second force. The third one, the third force of evil, was state violence. So again, around the 16th century, which is when all this crap is happening, gossip didn't just become demonized, it became criminalized. Women who were found to gather with their friends and talk to other women were punished, accused of witchcraft, and in many cases, tortured or killed. For example, there was this torture device called the scold's bridle, or the gossip's bridle, which was an iron muzzle that would be worn around a woman's head with a rod lined with spikes that would go into her mouth to make speaking impossible or to rip out her tongue if she tried to speak. Another torture device was called the ducking stool, which was a chair, picture a seesaw, and on one end was a chair that the woman would sit on and would be restrained into, and the seesaw was elevated and on wheels so that the woman would be paraded alongside a body of water, like a pond or a river, and repeatedly ducked into the water. And both the ducking stool and the scold's bridle were public humiliation devices to show other women that if you talk to other women, if you form female bonds and friendships and spread information with other women, you are going to get tortured, publicly humiliated, and possibly killed. And thousands of women were also accused of witchcraft and killed. Now, this is the part where you probably expect me to tell you how women fought back, but we're not quite there yet. Because we need to take a step back and rewind even further. Remember Robin Dunbar, the anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist I mentioned in my religion episode? He was the one who wrote the article that I quoted earlier about how predators influence group size. Dunbar is a specialist on primates, and in his research, he found that primates are very social animals, and they mainly bond together through grooming, which releases a lot of endorphins. Endorphins are hormones that act as natural painkillers and mood elevators. Even think about your cats. If you have cats, I know a lot of you baddies do, when your cats are sitting there grooming each other, that's a form of bonding. That's a really, really important form of bonding. I love when I go to one of my cats and I see the top of her head is wet and I know that the other cat was cleaning her. It's just, oh, it's so cute. But grooming is a very important part of social bonding because it releases those endorphins. However, as humans evolved and group sizes grew, throw back to the number 150 that I mentioned last time, that's as big as a group can get before people start losing track of one another and not having a one-to-one connection. As group sizes grew, language replaced grooming. Not only because the group size was too big, but also because grooming was very time consuming and it was a one-on-one activity, whereas language and talking was more efficient. To use a stupid corporate term, it optimized efficiencies. Literally, what does that mean? Nothing. But according to Dunbar, language replaced grooming as the main form of social bonding among humans. And not just any old language, but gossip. And he defines gossip as information sharing, mainly of a social nature. So the exact thing that women were doing in the Middle Ages was what is needed for our species to function. Not only were they doing nothing wrong, but they were doing something inherently human and vitally needed by social beings. And language is a uniquely human thing. Think about that. It's uniquely human. No other animal can have conversations or talk about something that isn't there. Monkeys can warn other monkeys that a predator is approaching, but there's no to tell other monkeys that, oh, yesterday I saw a hyena and it was lurking around and I think that it's still here, so we should be careful and we should all keep an eye out. There's no way to communicate that. You can only talk about what's imminent, what's in front of you. So information sharing is uniquely human, and women, who are usually social super connectors, are exceptionally good at this. Going back to the story I opened this episode with of my makeover, being in that hotel room with 3 of my other girlfriends, having that makeover done for me with the physical touch that's involved when someone is doing your makeup, and the chatter and the talk that happens when girls get together, all of that was such an important part of being a human and of being a woman. And the endorphins that were being released in my brain were probably insane because we were using language and physical touch. Not to be confused with the physical touch of the made up love languages. If a guy tells you his love language is physical touch, you can just punch him in the face. And I don't want to downplay the importance of physical touch either. Physical touch is still really, really important. And if you've ever cried in a woman's bosom, you know exactly what I mean. Once I cried in my friend's bosom, she has like double D's, and it's just the cushioning and the heat and the vibes were just amazing. And I cried in her bosom, and I'm honestly like, it healed me. I didn't even know I needed it, but I did. And I honestly think I'm overdue to cry in her bosom, so I'm probably going to text her after this episode. But zooming back out, information sharing through language is a very important part of being a social animal. It is necessary for our survival. And Dunbar's research found that the majority of conversations, something like 65-70% of conversations that they tracked in their research, were about social issues. In other words, gossip. But unfortunately, gossip, malicious gossip, is now something that people attribute to being uniquely feminine. Gossip is what happens when women get together and tear somebody to shreds or talk about idle talk about crap. And I'm going to quote something else from his article. This was the first sentence of the article. For reasons that are not entirely clear, gossip has acquired a decidedly shady reputation. Just like what I said in my religion episode last week, men seem to miss the nuances of a lot of things that have gender tied into them. Because the reason is very, very clear. There's historical evidence about the reason. So for somebody to have a research paper, somebody with a PhD who is empirically minded, who has studies to back up, data to back up his claims, opens an article saying that for reasons that are not entirely clear, when in fact they are. And who knows, maybe he knew about this and didn't want to get into the gender element of this, because after reading this article, I even did a Control F and typed in woman, female, gender, sex. Nothing came up. Nothing of substance came up. So patriarchy and men feared us for a reason. So let's talk about that reason. Remember that modern proverb I shared of the YouTube hate comment I got? Let me refresh your memory. This gentleman said, I'd rather have witches around than annoying brain-dead parasites that are feminists of today. They burned the wrong ones. First of all, I could probably squat more than you, but whatever. This comment, first of all, is not unique. I get a lot of comments like this that mention violence, rape, and other crap, but they all point to the same thing, that men fear me talking. And not just me. Anyone, any woman, when I get behind this mic and I start spitting facts and women listen to that and women agree and women engage, that is very scary to a lot of men, because women like me and like you are calling out people on their bullshit, are questioning things, are thinking critically about these things. This is probably one of the reasons my podcast grew so quickly over the last year, because women crave something like this and they need something like this. It's important for our social survival and for our social well-being. But what I realized since starting this podcast and since using my voice and building a community is that we are literally doing something that so many men fear, which is talking and sharing knowledge and information. And although we no longer have these physical torture devices like the fucking iron muzzle, we now have emotional ones. Guilt. Because not only is religion parasitic to morality, like I mentioned, but so is patriarchy. So when this single-celled gentleman said that feminists are brain-dead parasites, the actual parasite is patriarchy, religion, and other institutions that are parasitic to morality. Demonizing gossip and framing gossip in a way that is malicious and brain dead, to quote that single-celled, that amoeba, is a way to show how women are stupid, illogical, shallow, jealous, envious, time wasters, backstabbers. It frames idle talk as a personality trait. Oh, women like to gossip. Oh, when women get together, all they do is gossip and talk shit. And underlying that is the notion, the made up, misguided notion that women like to sit down and talk about each other. That women are gossips and they like to tear apart other women. And that's another piece of patriarchal propaganda and crap that puts women in competition with one another. Because a lot of us are conditioned to think of when we see a group of women talking together or a group of teenage girls, we think that they're mean girls, that they're bullies. And because our brains are wired for pattern recognition and for wanting to group things in categories that we understand, we simply categorize all women together. If we see a group of 2 or more women, they must be gossiping. They must be mean girls. And so that shows how that patriarchal propaganda and all that other propaganda that's endured for over 500 years of history feeds into our internalized patriarchy. Because even me, when I see a group of teenage girls, like at the mall or something, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm scared of them. I'm like, they're probably talking shit about me right now. Which is probably not the case. They're probably just talking about which store they're going to go shoplift from. That has nothing to do with me. But we've been conditioned to think this way. And again, that is a form of zero-sum thinking. And it's a form of competitive thinking, putting women in competition with one another. But like I mentioned in my Girly Love Power 23, I think, or 24, stop competing with other women. We're literally brainwashed to think that we have to keep competing with women and that other women are competing with us. When in reality, it's just the insecure women. It's the pick-me's. It's the victims of patriarchy. It's the women who are victims of their envy and who let envy run their lives and jealousy run their lives. Those are the women who are probably trying to compete with you and drag you down. The average healthy woman who is not plagued by the disease of envy and jealousy is not like that. But we're brainwashed to think that we are. And I've mentioned this a few times. There's a parenting book called Queen Bees and Wannabes, which is actually the book that inspired Tina Fey to make the movie Mean Girls. That parenting book, my mom read it while she was raising me. And now I use it as a reference source when I'm making a lot of my episodes. And I used that when I was writing this episode because it has an entire chapter on gossip and rumors. And gossiping has now become a regular part of girlhood, of adolescence, of coming of age. And my theory is and maybe this is wrong, I don't know, but I think that it's part of this projection because girls are taught from such a young age that they have to compete with other girls, that a lot of the time the only way they feel like they can get ahead is to talk badly, maliciously gossip about a girl behind her back, spread rumors about a girl, try to sabotage a girl through language and through the power of the word. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into that and stray further from God's light, but it's fascinating how intertwined gossip, malicious gossip specifically, and girlhood and womanhood have become. To the point where sometimes I feel guilty when I'm sitting down and talking with my girlfriends, and we don't talk about people in a bad way. We don't talk about, oh, look how ugly and fat she got. Our conversations are not like that. If we talk about people, it's in the context of learning something. Like, we recently talked about the fact that somebody we knew got cheated on. Her boyfriend chat on her. And we all knew both of the people in that couple. We knew the girlfriend and the boyfriend. And we're talking about that and we're like, okay, wow, what type of person is this guy? And in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about things that I can use for my episodes and my content to help other women learn. Women are keepers of knowledge. They're super connectors who make social bonds and nurture those bonds. And that's a very important part of being human. I hope that men are able to do that. And the thing is, men are the biggest gossips of all. Things like locker room talk or just talk between men is actual filthy, disgusting talk a lot of the time that I don't ever want to be privy to. The true gossips, the true people who are talking about others and putting them down and denigrating others are usually men. Men are the biggest gossips. So it's a projection. Like I say all the time, everything is a projection. And when men demonize women for talking to one another and quote unquote maliciously gossiping, it's really probably a projection of the way that they talk to one another and the garbage that they spew out when they're talking privately with a group of 2, 3, 4 men. May I never, ever witness that. But going back to women, because this is not a podcast about men, women are the keepers of knowledge. Every time I talk to my grandma, I get smarter. Because word of mouth is the most powerful social proof. So gossip is actually a way of preserving memory. Like when I talk to my grandma, she shares things about her life or her experiences that I wouldn't find anywhere else. Gossip is also a way of spreading collective intelligence, of exposing harmful behavior, like when my friends and I were talking about the guy who chat. It's also a way of reinforcing solidarity. When you talk about things like, even like sex, like your body, like your period, and understand things that, oh, I thought this was always me and I thought I was the only one. And then you talk to a woman and you're like, oh wait, other people experience this too. Or sharing, unfortunately bad things that happen to us, sharing traumatic events and getting solidarity with other women and getting comfort from other women. Or learning how other women also went through something similar and knowing that it's not just you and it wasn't your fault. So when women get together, we increase collective knowledge, we challenge a lot of these harmful narratives, we call out bad behavior, and this podcast is a form of gossip. And like I said, the growth of this show shows the power of female connection. Maybe I should call it the baddest witch in the building. The power of female connection. This podcast would not have grown so significantly and would not have had the community it has right now if we didn't crave that kind of social connection, especially with other women. So stop talking to ChatGPT, stop staying in your house, go out, talk to your friends, nurture your female friendships, check up on your friends, go out with them, and just I'm talking to myself too, because I feel like I've neglected a lot of my female friendships over the last year, especially focusing on my business and my podcast, because it's just been grind all the time. But I feel a piece of me missing because I don't see my girlfriends and I don't engage in talk with them as much as I used to. And I feel it in my mood a lot of the time. Although I've had a year of a lot of growth and a lot of milestones, I've also had a year of low-key being kind of depressed because now I work from home. I don't see my friends as often. And I feel that taking a toll on me. So starting now, not even in January, starting now, I really want to be better with leaving my house and nurturing my female friendships, Because at the end of the day, that's all we have. We have our relationship with ourselves and we have our relationship with our girls. The other relationships, like with men and partners, is tertiary. So I'm going to end this episode here. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for being part of this community. I really, really appreciate every single one of you. And make sure to rate this podcast 5 stars if you like it, so we can continue building the community and reaching other women who, also need this connection. Rating the show only takes, literally, it shouldn't take more than 5 seconds. If it does, forget it. But I guarantee you it will take 5 seconds. And if you want to grab a copy of my book, it is available on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle. And it's also available as an EPUB file, which is a separate link. Everything is in the show notes. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Don't forget that you are the baddest bitch in any motherfucking building you step foot in. And in the meantime, stay bad. Love you. Bye. Thank you to all the baddies who are supporting on Patreon. Shout out to Kate, Danny, Adriana, Mina, Gemma, Priya, Katya, Melissa, May, Naomi, Nilufar, Adelaide, Nadia, Faith, Amy, Simran, Melinda, Bindi, Sophia M, Sophia K, Jada, Yael, Roselle, Amara, Kat, Delia, and May. Thank you all so much. Women had social power. They had tight-knit networks with fellow women.